Cire 2018.
Something?
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you. On behalf of the New York City Fire Department, Deputy Chief Joseph Carlsen, Battalion Chief Jeffrey Facinelli, we'd like to thank everyone for coming and for inviting us. We're very humbled and happy to be here to share our experiences with you and to listen and to learn from your experiences as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you again for having us. Just to reiterate what Jeff said, it's a pleasure to be here. We're going to do two PowerPoint presentations today. The first one will include some videos from an actual fire, as well as some handy-talkie or radio transmissions from those fires as well. These are actual transmissions from the fire. Whether you're aspiring to be a firefighter, you're a company officer, or a chief officer, these handy-talkie or radio transmissions, you'll see we're actually from this fire. You'll see that they're calm. You'll see that they're precise. And this is all due to the training that we do with our members. So we're going to start now. Okay, this is a fire we had April 7th, just this past April 7th, 68-story high-rise building. Fire was on the 50th floor. It's a mixed occupancy building. The lower 27 floors. The lower 27 floors are commercial, open for business. The upper floors are residential, permanent multiple dwelling or residence. There's a video from the fire, and you can hear some handy-talkie or radio transmissions as well. Make it louder. Okay, this is a fire on the 50th floor.
You're on the floor above, right? 10-4, 5-1. At council office, there's fire out the window on the three sides. Windows just failed on the three sides. 10-4.
Okay, so you heard some handy-talkie transmissions or radio transmissions as well. Firefighters are talking very calm, verifying what position that they're in, letting the incident commander know that the windows had failed, that we now have fire out the back of the building. This is the back of the building. Fifth Avenue is on the other side.
So, in New York City, we have very strict building codes and fire codes. The fire department works closely with the New York City Department of Buildings and our local politicians to form our fire code and our building code. Since buildings have been built, the code has always evolved and changed, and it's become more strict. Unfortunately, many times due to tragic losses, that we've had to change the fire code. So this building was built in 1985 under the 1968 fire code. So it has certain things that were built into it that you will not see today because the code has changed. But at that time, in 1985, only the commercial building portion, the lower floors, as Chief Carlsen said, where they have offices or stores, were required to have automatic sprinkler protection. The upper floors, which is residential, at that time did not require a sprinkler system. Unfortunately, today if you build a building, everything has to be sprinkled. At that time it wasn't, and it's not required to be retrofitted or retroactive to put in sprinklers. So if it was built at that time, that's how it is. So the building we have today is a partially sprinkled building. Floors 1 through 27 are commercial office space. The 28th floor is a mechanical equipment floor, and then 29 through 68 are residential apartments. It also happens to be the apartment building where President Trump has his private residence. So it's a very special building because of security concerns. It's not a typical building that we would just respond to. It has a lot of other concerns for us because there's heavy security and we're dealing with the president's private residence as well.
So these are some of the things, when you go to a high-rise fire or any fire, you have certain mental checklists. We also have, physical paper checklists as well. Some of the things that we consider on the way to a fire, water, transportation, and communication. And we'll go into each one a little bit now and a little bit further into the presentation. So, water supply. Is the fire on the 3rd floor? Is the fire on the 50th floor? You'll see a presentation, the next presentation we have where the fire was on the 88th floor. So water supply is critical. We can't put the fire out without water. So how are we going to get water up to the 50th floor? Do we need high pressure pumping? Do we need special hose? Things like that. Transportation. Transportation is elevators, stairways. We don't want to walk up to the 50th floor, or to the roof, for that matter, of a 68-story or a 100-story building. Elevators are critical.
But a main concern for us with transportation is, as we all know, elevators are electrical devices, and they can fail during a fire. So we'll want to try to get early into the fire if we can, as much resources higher up, so we can have like a staging area below the fire area, and have as much resources as we can higher up into the building so that they're closer to fight the fire and it'll be less fatigue. So that's a main concern of a chief, is to make sure we can get people upstairs quickly before we lose the elevators, because then we'll be forced to use the staircases. And communications, we have multiple options for communications. We have, every firefighter in New York City is equipped with a radio that we can talk point to point. We have a repeater system internal to the fire department where we could use our department vehicles that have a repeater to boost the signal. Just for some reference, our regular radios transmit at 2 watts. I'm not sure the conversion, but we use 2 watts. If we go through a repeater system, it'll boost it to 45 watts. So we'll get a much stronger signal, and we're able to penetrate through the concrete and the steel in the high-rise buildings with the higher wattage. We also have what we call post radios, which are radios that we can carry point to point. Keep one in the lobby, one on the upper floor, and those are 40-watt radios. So again, we have a stronger signal to boost throughout the building. Then we also have a newer technology, which we'll show you in a little while, called a cutter radio, which is a point-to-point again that you can go through in the elevator shafts. You can connect to a piece of steel in the elevator shaft. We also use it for subway tunnels. We can connect to the rail of the subway, and we can transmit the radio signal through the steel, whether it be a steel beam through the building or the railway railroad tracks in the subway station. We can transmit that way. And of course, there's cell phones and other modes of communication. But we have multiple redundancies built in so that if we do lose one method of communication, we have one that we can fall back on and rely on. We don't just rely on one. We have multiple resources available to us.
Okay, so we have prearranged signals. I'm not sure how every department does it. We have prearranged signals. So we have what's called a 1076 signal and a 1077 signal.
So these are predetermined, as Chief Carlsen said, and this is what we would give to our dispatcher. So the first arriving unit, the initial incident commander, will look at the scene and see what we're faced with. And based on experience and knowledge and our prior training, they're going to say, okay, we have a visible fire in a occupied residential high-rise building or mixed occupancy building, and they'll give the appropriate signal to our dispatcher, who in turn will then send the appropriate resources, which are predetermined for firefighting, for EMS. We have everything predetermined. So we say, give us this, and we know that we have a set amount of resources coming. Now, we're fortunate. We have a lot of staffing and a lot of resources. So even though it's predetermined, we still can call for additional, as you'll see, we can call for additional assistance if we need. But this is just to make it more simple for all of us, because as we all know, in an emergency, a lot of things are going on. People are talking to you, coming up to you. We don't want to be there saying, give me one of these, give me one of those. So it's just a mass movement of resources initially, and then we can add in what we need as the situation develops.
Okay, so just to build a little bit on what Chief Facinelli said, why is there a difference? Because although these buildings are all high-rise buildings, we can have a 50-story commercial building used for business, or we could have a 50-story residential building. They have different features. Typically, building systems are a little different. In multiple dwellings or residential buildings, sometimes the heating or the air conditioning is just for that individual apartment. Whereas in an office building, you may have a ventilation system that's for multiple floors, 10, 15, up to 20 floors possibly. So that's a different concern for us, spreading smoke throughout the building on multiple floors. Openable windows versus windows that don't open. So you might have, in a residential building, the windows may open, where in a commercial building they may not. A fire safety director. You want to talk about a fire safety director?
Yes, we have civilians that are hired by the building, required by code, to be a fire safety director. Many times they are firefighters and police officers that are retired from working active duty, but they still want to work, or they still have to work, and they will get hired by these buildings to be a fire safety director. They have to go to a course over several months to learn fire code and different requirements that the fire department has and the buildings department has. They take an exam, and then they get certified by the fire department to be a fire safety director. And they're basically in charge of that building for fire safety. They have to coordinate drills for the people in the building, for the occupants. They'll coordinate quarterly drills, yearly drills. They will distribute information on fire safety to the people in the building. They will also, and most important for us, be the interface with the fire department. So should there be a response, emergency response to their building, either that person or their deputy or their assistant has to meet the fire department and stay with us throughout the entire operation. And they'll provide us specific information to the building, keys sometimes to certain areas that we need to minimize damage. They'll get us into mechanical areas, parts of the building they'll have to do to control the building systems, and they'll be very knowledgeable with it, because as we know, each building's a little different. So we really rely on them, and at our command post where we set up our operation, we want that person there with us the whole time, so we have good control of the building, and they're very valuable to us. Again, most of them are familiar with our operation, because a lot of them are retired, so it's a very good resource for us.
And also, the fire safety directors are in the commercial buildings or hotels. Residential buildings will not have a fire safety director. So, again, different resources for a different type of building, different building systems. Next thing is building engineer. Typically, the high-rise buildings will have a building engineer on duty. We can call for him. Most of the time in a multiple dwelling, you may or you may not have someone on duty to help you with the building systems. And building information card.
So I only have a copy, but we could pass this around later. There's a requirement in one of our local laws for hotels and office buildings to have what they call a building information card. And it's a larger card, larger than what I'm holding right now, laminated, and it's required to be in several places. At the fire command station, where the fire alarm panel is, we have to have a copy, and then the fire safety director will have a copy in his office. And what it is, and I know this is a blank one, but on the one side of the card, it has all specific information about the building, such as the address, what floors are commercial, what floors are residential, population of the building by day, by night, because again, if it's an office building, at night it'll be, people go home from the day of work. Stairway designations, which one has a standpipe, which one goes all the way from the first floor to the roof, which one goes down to the basement, because most of these buildings have multiple staircases. Tell you about the elevators, which floors they serve, ventilation zones, like Chief Carlsen was saying. It'll tell you which banks of floors are serviced by the heating and air conditioning, because it goes by groups of floors. Tells you about the utilities, any hazardous materials stored in the building, fire protection systems. Maybe they might have special systems in the building that we need to be aware of, communications. And then on the back, it has a pictorial diagram of the building. It'll show you where the standpipes are in the stairwells, which this is elevator banks, which elevator banks serve which floors. So it gives you a visual representation of the building as well, in addition to the information. So this is very big for us because there's so many buildings in New York City. It's impossible for anyone to know every building. So when we come in, we'll have this information handed to us and available to us, so we can make our tactical and strategic decisions based on the information that we have from the building.
And so this is required for most hotels and office buildings. Residential buildings typically will not find a building information card. We also have them on our iPad and our desktop computer in the office. So on the way to a fire, we can pull it up on our iPad, and we can look at not only the building information card, which they're required to have, but they have the floor plans of all of these buildings downloaded to our iPads. And as we're responding in, if we know it's the 50th floor, we can not only get an overview of the building from the building information card, but we can also get the floor plans of that floor and sort of map out where we need to go, where the fire apartment is, the closest stairway, the closest standpipe, and things like that. So this is very helpful when we're going into a building that does have one.
You want to go into the amount of people? Just to give you an idea of resources, when we talk about the signal 1076 or 1077, resource-wise, if you transmit a 1076 to the dispatcher, firefighter-wise, for the FDNY, you'll get 100 firefighters on the scene. We have 100 people coming in various fire trucks. That's for a 1076.
That includes chief officers, 100 fire personnel, chief officers, firefighters on ladder companies, truck companies.
Right. 1077, you have just a couple less because a little different resources. You have roughly 92 firefighters coming for a residential fire. That's just one alarm in this type of occupancy. This particular fire that Chief Carlsen was the incident commander of went to a fourth alarm. So it was a 1076, and then second alarm, third alarm, fourth alarm. We did the calculations, and we came up with, there was chiefs, all ranks included, to fight this fire was 216 firefighters showed up to fight this fire. And that also includes companies to relieve the initial units. Obviously, the initial units that went in don't need to be relieved because of fatigue. We have companies coming in to relieve them.
Okay, so let me get that fixed. So like Chief Facinelli said, we do have a lot of resources, and we can get them there pretty quickly. Hello? Okay. So we can get these resources there pretty quickly, and everyone has an assignment. We have specific companies that do certain things, and we're not going to get into every one of them. We'll have one company that's just what we call a fast team. They're there in case a firefighter goes down. That's their only job. They'll go up to the floor below, 49th floor at this particular fire, and wait. They have all special tools ready to extricate a firefighter if they get in trouble. We have one engine company that comes. They're only responsible for medical care, and that's in addition to all the ambulances and EMS personnel that come. We have a unit that comes that's a lobby control unit. They make announcements over the PA system. If the building has one, they control the elevators. So not everyone that's coming is fighting the fire. We have people in a support role to help us fight this fire and to make sure that we have what we need for the water supply, for the communication, for the transportation. So everyone has a role, and everyone knows their role when they get there. When they get dispatched, they're notified. You are the lobby control unit. You are the communications engine, or whatever their designation may be. Okay, so again, as the fire starts to expand, and as resources start to come in, we need to expand the incident command system. You have to be in command, what we call in the FDNY, command and control. You have to be in command of this fire, and you have to be in control of this fire. So how do we do that? We come in, initially the 1st Battalion Chief arrives, the first units arrive, they start making their way up to the fire floor. As more units come in, they start filling in the different portions of the incident command system. As I arrived, I'll ask the 1st Battalion Chief for certain information. I want to know where we're up to. I want to start addressing the water, the transportation, the communication. How are we talking? Who's in what spot? And this is just my first interaction that day. And you'll hear throughout any of the handy-talkie transmissions, these are the actual transmissions from this fire.
Division 3 to Battalion 8, what's your location? I'm at the 5-6, the MD level in the lobby, 5-6 Street. All right, so will we have more units reported to the 5-6 Street side or the 5th Avenue side? We're using 5th Avenue as exposure 1, they're coming into the 5-6 Street, the 5-6 Street. 9 battalions up there, fire sector. All right, thanks for what. Do we have an attack there? The attack staircase is A, as in apple. All right, thanks for what.
Okay, so just to give you some reference, Division 3 is Chief Carlsen. Battalion 8 is the same job I would do, just a different battalion, it's different chief. So Battalion 8 is the initial incident commander, so he's the first chief to arrive, and he's giving him some information as to what he's doing. Letting him know where he is. He's on the 56th Street side, 5th Avenue. Those are the cross streets where the building is located. We say exposure 1, so I'm not sure how every fire department does it, but we go in a clockwise fashion. The front of the building where the chief is, we call exposure 1. I know some departments use maybe exposure A, B, C, D. The fire department in New York, FDNY, uses 1, 2, 3, and 4 so that we can orient ourselves through communications and all be on the same page for communications with which part of the building that we're in. So he's saying exposure 1 is this particular street. Establishing the fire sector. Obviously, at a large fire, any fire, we want to have manageable sections. So it's too much for one person to run the whole thing. So we'll set up a lobby command post, which we'll talk about, but the fire sector, we consider the floor that's on fire and the floor above that. So those 2 floors, which is going to be a lot of work for everybody, we put into one sector. So it's a more of a manageable section for us to work with. And they talk about an attack stair. So what that means is, obviously in a building like this, we're going to be doing a standpipe operation. So we're going to use a stairwell. We have multiple staircases in these buildings. So the one that we're using for attack, the door from the floor where the fire is to the stairwell will be open. So in effect, that stairwell is going to become a chimney. So we don't want anybody coming down that staircase to possibly self-evacuate, which we have to control. So we established that as our attack stair, because we're going to be connecting our standpipe hose in the stairwell. In this case, it's the A stairwell, from the floor below up into the fire floor, and that door will be open. So we have to continually search that staircase to make sure that we don't have any civilians coming into there and being overcome by the smoke and the heat and the fire gases. So we want to establish that quickly so we all know point of operation, that's where we're operating from, not the other staircases. Conversely, if we have an attack stair, the other staircases become the evacuation staircase, so that if we have to remove people from a certain area, we will not use the A staircase because we know we're using that for firefighting. We'll use an alternate staircase. So it just puts us all on the same page, on the same game plan.
And also, so just to go back to the exposure, if you heard, and during the first video, they said we have fire out of the exposure 3 side. How did they know that was exposure 3? Because we designated exposure 1, and then it goes in a 1, 2, 3, 4 clockwise, right? So if we don't designate an exposure, especially on this building, which is a corner building, we may be getting information that's, or giving out information that's not correct. Maybe the exposure 3 side to one person is the exposure 4 side to another person. So it's very important, especially definitely on a corner building or a building that fronts on more than one street, to get in, identify where the exposures are going to be. So that was done. You heard that in the first video, and you hear it here as well. Also, the attack stairway A, it's important we transmit that over the radio. Nobody enters the fire floor from any other stairway than the A stairway. We make announcements. The lobby control unit that comes in, we tell them, when you make the announcements to all the floors, do not enter the A stairway under any circumstance. Use the B stairway if you need to evacuate, but we tell them, remain in place. That's what we, in a high-rise building, a fireproof building, we want, in New York City, we tell everyone to remain in place. Not everybody follows instructions, so sometimes people do come down, but if they do come down, we want them to use a stairway other than the attack stairway, which is the A stairway. So this, the exposure identification, affects the whole fire. The identity of the attack stairway will affect the announcements that are made later on in the fire. And this is just building or setting everything up so we can have a successful operation.
So a fire command station is required in all these high-rise buildings. They look similar, but obviously architects design their buildings in certain ways. They all have similar features, but they don't all look the same. This is just one example of what you may see in a building. This would be typical of either a straight commercial building or a mixed commercial residential. If it was just residential, you wouldn't see it like this. But anyhow, you'll have people there. There'll be security. There'll be building service people to help with people day-to-day operations, receiving packages and stuff like that. But behind what we're interested in is there's all the system controls for the building. It'll tell us where, obviously, the fire alarm panel. It'll be an LCD display. It'll tell you where the alarm is coming in, which devices have activated. Is it a smoke detector? Is it a pull station? Is it a sprinkler activation? It'll give us all the information from the fire alarm system. It'll give us elevator status, because they have multiple elevator cars in the building. It'll tell us, okay, this car is on the 10th floor, this car is on the 20th floor. So it'll give us locations. It'll also, if the building is equipped, we'll have the purge system, so we can have positive pressure ventilation in stairwells, possibly, if it's equipped, ventilation from each floor or zone. We can control to purge smoke. We can also shut down dampers, close dampers on the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems from here, where we can shut down certain zones if we don't want the smoke to move out throughout the building. The other thing that's helpful for us is it has security cameras, so we can look. If you're in the lobby and say we have a fire on the 50th floor, it may not be evident from the outside of the building. So when you come in, you can look, okay, show me the video of the public hallway on the 50th floor, and you look, you might see smoke. You might not see anything, meaning that the camera's destroyed already. Or it might look fine. Oh, I don't see any smoke. It looks okay. So we can get a lot of situational awareness before we even leave the lobby. We can just gather some sizing up information just from this area. And this is also where we're going to interface with the fire safety director and the building staff. And it's also a focal point for all the units that are coming into the fire, all the units that we're requesting. We'll meet the chief in that area, so we all know where to meet the chief to get our orders and our directions.
And this is also the place where you would have the building information card and the floor plan. So you're going to come in and you're going to ask certain questions to the fire safety director, building personnel, and if the fire safety director or the engineer is not there, you're going to request them. Have them come into the lobby, and they're going to assist you throughout the operation because, like Chief Facinelli said, every building is different, and it's impossible to know every single building. But the engineers will know their building, and we'll work with them, with the lobby control unit, and they'll work with the building engineer to accomplish whatever task we ask them to accomplish, whether it's closing dampers, or pressurizing a stairway, or whatever else needs to be done. They're going to do it under our direction. Okay, so command post location. In order to be in command and in control of a fire, you have to be in a position to where you can manage this fire effectively, manage the resources that are coming in, give them assignments, or tell them just to stand by, stand fast. For a command post, it's important, if possible, if the board can be set up within view of the elevators, the building entrance, and near the location to the reception desk and facing out. So why do we say this? If you look at this, this is a different fire. The command board, you can see the command board right there. It's facing the entrance. I can see who's coming into the building. I see which firefighters, which units are arriving. If that command board is turned around, I may not even know who's at this operation until they come to me. I see them arrive. To the left, Jeff, you got the pointer right there? To the left is the fire control panel. Right there, that's the fire. I can see the fire safety director. He's there. He's telling me what floors are coming in, what smoke detectors are activated, where the pull stations are. Just to the left of that is the elevator. So no one gets past me or the incident commander or any chief officer that's there unless they walk past that command board to the elevator. So we're in command and we're in control of this incident. Just to the right of me, I'm on the bottom and the right there, just to the right is where the building personnel are. The front desk, this happens to be a hotel on Fifth Avenue. Just to the right is where the building personnel are. They're receiving calls from occupants who are concerned. They smell smoke. Should they evacuate? Questions like that. They're giving those questions to the gentleman right in front of me with the helmet on. He's the 1st DEW Battalion Chief. He's taking that information, he's writing it down. And then now we're sending firefighters, whether they're in the building already or they're in the lobby, and giving them these assignments. Go to apartment 17A, go to room 30B. They're concerned, they smell smoke, or sometimes they say, they feel they're trapped or they need medical assistance. And we'll send, if they say they need medical assistance, we'll send a unit up there that has medical equipment. If they just feel that they're trapped, we can send firefighters up, and if they need to be removed, we can remove them. Most of the time, people are just concerned, they want information, we go up to them, and this is how we interface with the building personnel and command and control this fire.
It's also a large challenge for us. Post-September 11th, people see a high-rise building on fire, they just think it's going to collapse, and they want to get out. So we know that sometimes they're safer staying where they are due to the construction of the building. They don't realize that, so they say, the building's on fire, I have to get out, which makes our job much more difficult because now they're self-evacuating, we don't have good control over it, so we try to really use the building staff to help us with that. And the other thing that could be a positive, but it sometimes is a negative, is cell phones and social media. Some people could be so far removed from the fire itself in the building, they don't even know there's a fire in the building. But they might get a message on their cell phone, a text message, or on Facebook or on Twitter, hey, isn't that at your address? You have a fire in your building. And now they're like, oh, there's a fire in my building. And now we have people 30 and 40 floors above the fire coming out into the hallway and going down and becoming part of the problem. Whereas if they didn't know about it, they wouldn't even realize there was an issue going on. So it compounds our problems because we have these people coming out of all over the place that wouldn't normally know. It's just a challenge for us to deal with. That's why we need so many resources coming, because we have to deal with all these people that may be self-evacuating.
Okay, so now we'll just go into a little bit of sectoring and communication and how we maintain that manageable span of control. Just another incident, you can see where the board wasn't even in yet. We just got into the lobby. That's a post radio for communication. We'll get into that a little bit later. The elevators are right there. We're going to gain control of this lobby very, very quickly as soon as that board comes in, and we're going to start managing this fire from the lobby, but in an organized way.
Okay, so this diagram, there's a lot going on with it, but we'll try to simplify it for you. So the lobby command post is where the first chiefs are. That would be the 1st battalion chief and the 1st deputy chief. The first people to arrive will be at the lobby command post we just went over. And we have different channels because it's too much radio traffic in an operation this large to all be on the same channel. We'll never get messages through. We'll be stepping on one another. So what we do is we have a tactical channel, which is our, for us, it's channel 2. Doesn't make a difference. That's just what we have. That's a 2-watt channel where we'll talk firefighter to firefighter or company officer to firefighter. Intra-unit communications, where are you, what are you doing, we need this. So that's the communication channel for tactical operations. Then we're going to switch to a larger operation for the chief officers to talk to what we call a command channel. Okay, so a command channel is not going to interfere with the tactical operations. It's going to be more strategic between the chiefs, so we can communicate with each other. Hey, what do you have on these upper floors? How are the searches going? Whatever questions they have at the command post, the chief officers in the higher floors can answer for him without interfering with the tactical. And then, as we referred to earlier, one of our biggest challenges is search and evacuation above the fire, especially if you have multiple floors above the fire. So we'll establish another post, which we call the search and evacuation group, and they'll be on another channel, a secondary channel, secondary tactical, so that they're not interfering with the tactical firefighting, they're not interfering with the command channel, and they're on their own channel. So we try to sector it so that it's a more manageable operation communication-wise, and we're not interfering with each other. Yet we still have common communication through the command channel to talk back to the command post so that they know the overall operation, any problems we're having, progress we're making, any resources we may need, any issues that we may have, we can still communicate back to the command post while not stepping on each other for the whole operation. So we sector it and we break it up, and that's what this is saying here.
Just to build a little further on what Chief Facinelli was saying. So as you can see, LCP, Lobby Command Post on the bottom, first Deputy, 1st Battalion Chief, and the Command Chief, when he comes in, would be in the lobby. The 2nd Battalion Chief, if you heard the handy-talkie or the radio recording before, it said that he's the fire sector. So the 2nd Battalion Chief that comes in will now go up and manage operations initially on the fire floor and the floor above. Okay, then at this operation, you can see in bold, the 3rd Battalion Chief goes up to do the search and evacuation group. He's assigned specific units. He is on the command channel, handy-talkie channel 2, and will speak back and forth, like Chief Facinelli said, with chief officers, and he reports down anything he needs. Whether the stairways are clear, we need EMS up here, we found a fire victim, whatever it is, that will not interfere with, if you look to the right where it says HT1, that is just for the fire floor and the floor above. No one else is talking on that channel. So that's the critical part of the operation. Those messages need to get through, whether there's a Mayday transmitted, an urgent transmitted, or whatever other message. We do not want to interfere with that, the communications going on the fire floor, because someone's asking, give me a report that says, oh, the stairway on the 50th or the 60th floor is clear. That's a separate channel, and the search and evacuation group talks to his people on a separate channel. Actually, we have the next slide will show us more of this. But again, this is how we break down the chief officer positions, that we assigned the 3rd Battalion Chief to the search and evacuation group, the 4th Battalion Chief. We divided the fire sector in 2 because we had some exposure problems on the floor above, so we wanted more supervision up there, so we assigned the 4th Battalion Chief, and then the 5th Battalion Chief to what we call is a forward staging area, as Chief Facinelli mentioned earlier. Sometimes elevators, they're affected by water. Depends if they're in proximity to the fire or not. This particular operation, we had no problem with the elevators, but what we want to do is get as many people up to the floor below, or to 2 floors below, as fast as possible. In case the elevators do go out, we have resources up there to relieve, to assist, whatever that might be. So we'll go into, so this is basically the chief officer position, and again, build the incident command system out as the incident progresses.
We talk about span of control, in management, and if it's a serious situation, the fewer people you have to supervise, the more efficient you can be at it, and the more strict control you can keep over your units. So we try to basically what we're doing is span of control is what we're doing, just making it into manageable pieces. And this is a communication slide. Again, the two are kind of go hand in hand, the chief officer positions and the communications. This just shows you the groups. Before we showed you the chiefs that are in the groups, but it shows you again who's talking to who, from lobby command post, which is LCP, and then this actually shows you another option for communications. I mentioned earlier that cutter radio. It's a linked channel, point-to-point, 2 radios, which we're going to show you in a minute on the upcoming slide. That's just another way, another method of us to communicate without interfering. It's a redundancy built in. It's a great tool, very, very reliable, and it's great for communications in high-rise buildings, especially when you're dealing with a lobby command post and a fire on the 50th floor. You're going through a lot of steel and concrete to talk. It works like we're talking right now. It's perfect.
Okay.
All right, and here's what I'm talking about. This happens to be a company that makes these particular radios. It's a handheld, like suitcase type of device. Has a handset you could talk on. You can dial in different channels for wherever you're operating. I mentioned again, we use this in subways also because you can go very long distances if you hook up to a metal rail. And if you look at the diagram here in the building, it shows you, again, it's just showing you a compressed view, but they're saying that top floor is the 75th floor, and then that's the lobby. So you would be able to speak with no problem using this system, going from the lobby and through the elevator, the core of the elevator, because they use the steel superstructure of the building to transmit the radio transmissions up through the core of the elevators, right to the 75th floor. So no matter how tall the building is, you'll easily talk to them. I know in the subways in New York City, they've gone to Times Square in New York City and connected the Cutter radio to the train tracks, and they've talked to other boroughs. In other words, they'll be in Manhattan, and they can talk to people in Brooklyn or in the Bronx because it just travels right through the steel. So it's a very effective tool that we have in our toolbox for communications.
Yeah. And like we said before, we have an engine company that comes in, assigned specifically this task. Their task is to set this radio up and manage all communications for the incident commander at this operation. So we have all companies that they know, they're assigned, they carry these, and when they get called, they're very efficient. They know how to set them up, and they set them up very quickly. So again, like Chief Facinelli said, once we have that link channel in place, once these two radios are talking to each other and they're linked, we're good to go. That's the main part of the setup, is getting the link channel, and then we'll talk, like he said, like we're standing here right next to each other.
Okay, so these are two different things now. We have a vehicle repeater system. So in the battalion chief's car, which is represented here, obviously we're parking outside the building. We try to park across the street so that we can triangulate on an angle the signal. So we'll park across the street. The chief will bring a particular radio into the lobby with him that he can turn on, and it connects to the repeater in the chief's car. And then when they're speaking to the people in the staffing positions above, that signal will go through the lobby to the car and then up and boosted at 45 watts to the upper parts of the building. So that's the vehicle repeater system. Not every battalion has it. Like my battalion in the Bronx does not have it, but the battalions that are in Manhattan, parts of Queens that come into Manhattan with taller buildings, parts of Brooklyn, they do have it. And they'll set up that repeater system. And it's very strong. Matter of fact, they're only allowed to use one operation in the city at a time. So like if I have a fire in Midtown and I tell my dispatcher I'm using the repeater system, if there's another fire close by, they don't have that option anymore because it's so powerful, we'll be stepping on each other in a neighboring operation. So whoever has the fire first gets to use it if they want to, and then other people will have to use the other options. The other thing we have is the post radio, which you see in the photograph. That is another handheld similar to the Cutter, but it's different technology, and that is a 40-watt radio that we can carry, again, point to point. We'll bring one into the lobby. Another one will go up to the fire sector, which is right the fire floor on the floor above. They'll bring it up to the floor below and set up, and we can talk point to point, and that is normally the mode of communication we use for the command channel between the chiefs. Now, the one thing that we didn't mention is it's not always the chief talking on the radio. We're fortunate in the New York City Fire Department, every chief is assigned an aide. So we have a person that will carry it for me, but besides that, he'll also talk for me because, the chief, as we all know, being chiefs, we're busy talking, people are talking to us, we're making decisions, we're taking things in. You can't possibly capture everything. So we have the aide, he could be a scribe for us, he could be writing things down, he could be talking. Especially when you work with an aide for a while, they get to know how you think and what you like. So a lot of times it's automatic. You have your aide, oh, listen, Chief, I requested this for you, because he'll anticipate what you're going to want. So it's a nice, it's almost like a marriage, pretty much. And it works out well. And so a lot of times the actual voice you hear may be the aide giving the transmission, but he's speaking on your behalf. So we have assistants in setting all this up at everything. They actually drive us to the fire, too. We don't even drive to the fire. We get trumped.
Don't give away all the secrets. So at this particular fire, we used all three of these methods of communication. We used the post radio, which is also point-to-point radio. We used the vehicle repeater system, and we used the Cutter radio. So again, this is the job of the incident commander to ensure that this operation is managed properly and all the resources we need are there. It does take a little time to set all of this up, but in the end, once it's all set up, the operation does run much smoother. And just to look at the picture on the left again, The reason it goes out and back up is because it's very difficult to transmit. If that just tried to transmit straight up through the building, through the concrete and the steel, it's very, very difficult to get the signal through. So once it goes out, it goes up through the free air and back into the building at an upper level. So it helps us to get a clearer message and to get further distance. Okay, so this is the actual command board at the fire. We're winding down a little bit. I had the aide take a couple of pictures, and you can see how we manage this fire. You can see the picture on the right is just it's blown up a little bit. It's the same picture from the left. So you can see we had the 48th floor, 49th floor. We had, if you look on the right side, staging operations, SAE, where all the units are. We're tracking everyone in case we have an emergency, a mayday, or an urgent message. We know where these units are. We're tracking them. When they come back down, you can see on the picture on the left, we take them and we move them out from where they were operating. They come down, they report back into me, and we've been relieved from the fire sector. Okay, do you have all your members? Yes, everyone's okay? Yes. We take their magnet and we move it now to the units that have been relieved. And this is how we manage this incident, so we can keep track of where everyone is. You want to go to the iPad?
Yeah, just to give you some reference on these little tiles you see, they're color coordinated by company. So red would be a ladder company, black would be a engine company, and all these command boards. On the upper cover, we have every company in the city. So that's roughly 204 engines, 143 ladder companies, plus our rescue companies. There's 5 of those squads. Every unit that we have assigned to the fire department, we have a little tile for, and it's up there. Because we never know who's going to be coming in. We call for resources. Depending upon what else is happening in the city, we're not going to get the same companies all the time. Not always. So we're prepared for whoever comes. We have a particular tile for them, and we can move them around. This system has been set up for a very long time, where it's a magnetic board and a dry erase board, so we can draw things with markers. But we've moved into modern technology. If you look on the photo here, you see an iPad. We have an electronic command board now. So it's exactly the same as what we have on the right, except that it's all electronic. And it's connected to our dispatching system. So that if we transmit the next alarm, or if we request verbally more resources, it automatically populates onto the iPad in whatever unit it is. It'll be, engine 1, it'll be black, boom, it'll pop up on my iPad, and now I have them available. And I can track my resources on the iPad. It also has like an area where you can, almost like a paint area, where you can draw with your finger an outline of the building, like they did here on the right. You can do it right on the iPad, and you can drag and click and move the companies right onto the iPad and track your resources that way. Because one of our big jobs as chiefs is accountability and resource accountability. So it's good, especially if something goes wrong for us. If everything goes well, there's not a problem. But if we have a collapse, or if we have firefighters that are lost, or there's a situation where we have to retreat, we want to make sure we account for everybody. And if we don't know where people are, it's impossible to do. But if we keep tight control over who's in which areas, we know who to call, we know who to be looking for if there's a structural failure, we know who's supposed to be in that area. So we keep very strict control over that. And that's one of the biggest questions the next level chief comes in. He wants to know where everybody is, just to make sure we have tight control of everybody, because we don't, we all want to go home at the end of the day, obviously. So that's a big job for us.
And do the point, believe that. So on the top left there,
yeah.
You get the pointer?
Right here, this upper left-hand corner is another device called electronic. It's called, we say EFAS, which stands for Electronic Fireground Accountability System. And what that means is, again, going back to accountability, on our radios, we have an emergency button. It's a little orange button on the microphone where if you push it, it makes a loud sound. Now, I know on your breathing apparatus, you have an alarm where if you don't move for a certain amount of time, it'll make noise. We have that as well. But we really can't track that too much. All you know is you hear a noise, you're not sure who it is, where it is. We now have integrated our radios that every firefighter has with, at this printable readout, it tells you their name, their position, meaning, are they driving today? Are they on the hose? Are they at the roof? It tells you their position in the company. It tells you what company they're from. And it also has a timestamp, so that every time you push, it tells you at this certain time is when you transmitted. So what it does is it tells you for a couple things. If there is if the fire does go poorly and there's a fatality or something on our end, we can do for investigative purposes, we can see the timeline of everything. Hopefully we don't have to do that. But more importantly, if you hit the button and you declare an emergency, it'll highlight in red, hey, Jeff Facinelli is having an emergency, whatever it is. You know, I'm lost, I'm trapped, you know, I don't feel well, I got hurt, whatever the situation is, you hit that button, it's going to pick up on the electronic fireground accountability system, which we have in all the chief's cars, and this is a portable one, which I'll explain in a second. In red, it'll flash in red that, hey, this guy is the one that's in trouble. So now we know who we're looking for. We'll know where we're looking for him so we can narrow down our search, and it'll help us with accountability. Now, obviously, if somebody has, let's say, a medical condition, like if I have a heart attack and fall over, I can't push the button. But if Joe comes up and finds me and says, oh, Jeff's having a medical emergency, he can hit the button, but now we'll think Joe's in trouble, but he can get on the radio and say, listen, I have an unconscious firefighter on the 48th floor, and then we can get people to come help. Like the FAST unit we talked about earlier, that's assigned just for firefighters, they would come up and package us and bring us down and get us the medical care that we needed. Now, the reason why we have a portable one is because in the chief's cars, you may not, and you definitely won't, pick up emergency transmissions on the upper floors. So what they did was said, okay, you know what, we don't want to, this is too important to miss. So we'll have a portable version so that fire sector we talked about, where people are, you know, right below the fire, staging all our equipment, we'll bring that one up there, this portable one. We'll keep one at the command post, we'll keep one upstairs. It also can only monitor one channel at a time. So if you have multiple channels being used, like this operation, you need one for each channel, because it can only monitor one channel at a time. But with that, we'll bring it upstairs, so any emergency messages that are transmitted on the upper floors will be captured, and then if there's a problem, we can radio down to the command post, let them know what we have going on up there, because they won't know in the command post unless we tell them, because it's too far away to pick up. And we're monitoring all the channels. So potentially you could have multiple of these operating. You had 4 channels, right?
But this one, 3.
3 channels were operating, so he'll have 3 separate devices monitoring one for each channel, and a firefighter will be assigned to monitor those to make sure there's no transmissions, emergency transmissions coming in, so we can keep track of our staff.
A little confusing, right?
Sorry.
Try to do it in real life. But it really does work when everybody does what they're supposed to do. It actually works. So we've used Chief Facinelli said, the portable EFAS all the time. We use it. We use the iPad all the time. I use the iPad all the time to get the floor plans, to get the building information card. Every fire, we set up the board. We take the magnets down every time. There's no time to say that's when something happens. When the time you say, this looks like a small fire, we don't need it this time, right? Never let your guard down. Never take it for granted that the fire is out. One of my policies is the FAST unit is the last unit to leave. If we're taking up hose or walking down the stairs and someone falls or has a heart attack, they're the last one to leave. They know that. So I would say in anything in the fire service is never let your guard down. Always try to keep improving. Never let your guard down. And if you do it the same way at every fire, you'll develop that, what we call muscle memory, if you always do it that way, it'll always work right. And if you start to deviate and try and just bypass certain things, it's something, you're going to miss something, so you don't want to miss anything.
We're at 55 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so, hold on. Okay, so let's go back right here. The next slide is going to be transmissions, actual transmissions from the fire. You'll see how calm the guys are. We train on this all the time. These guys are on the fire floor where you'll see the video and you'll hear the transmissions and you'll think these guys are sitting in the firehouse transmitting, because this is what we train on. And training and preparation, for me, is the key to success. You can't open up a book at a fire and say, where should we stretch that line? What happens if a firefighter goes down? You have to know it before. You have to train before. They have to know what we're looking for, and we have to ensure that they give us the information that we need. So you'll hear these transmissions are from the fire. It's the officer telling the incident commander, the fire sector, what stairway they're using, that they're hooking up the hose line, and it'll tell them when they have water on the fire, and also giving directions from the floor above. So the firefighters on the floor above, on the fire floor, you can't see. So they're giving them directions from the floor above to how to get to the fire room and the fire apartment. So just listen to really good transmissions, actual transmissions.
Latitude, go with your message. Group to two, you've got fire venting out the windows in the rear apartment, right side of the apartment, closest to the free side.
Okay, 10-4, thank you. He's crawling around there, he's saying 10-4, thank you, right? Great composure. So, latitude of command, we're using the A stairwell, right? We went over why we need to know the stairwell. That's a required communication from that first due truck officer down to the incident commander. Engine 8 is hooking up to the standpipe. I'll let you know when we have water on the fire. Perfect, perfect, right? And next communication, roof to 2, so he's the roof firefighter in this building. He's on the floor above. You've got fire venting out the windows in the rear apartment, right side of the apartment, closest to the 3 side, exposure 3. Again, why do we need to designate an exposure early? Because it affects every communication at the fire. If you would have said exposure 4, the guys are going in the wrong direction. That can be a big problem, right? So we designate that exposure early. Everyone knows what it is. When we give the information, everyone knows what side or what direction to go in. What's next? Here's just a quick picture of the window on the apartment above. 4 of these windows actually failed at this fire. This is the 5th window that started to fail. It's very rare at a high-rise fire with these type of windows that you get one to fail. This was a very advanced fire. This is what the window on the floor above looked like, and we'll show you a picture in the next slide from the outside what this window looks like. Okay, so that window is that one on the top right. You can see the little piece in the bottom window is missing, and the outside pane actually failed. Another point to a safety issue is, and you look on, this is the next day. I took this picture the next day from the building across the street. You can see that the windows go down to the floor. So as a firefighter, you need to be very careful when you're searching. If you don't feel the floor in front of you, like whether it's an elevator shaft or whether it's an open window, you don't want to crawl out this window accidentally, right? So again, very important when you practice your search techniques. If there's no floor, you stop and you retreat. In smoke condition, with the windows failed, this could be a really bad situation to encounter.
All right, so just lastly, we wanted to point out a couple things. You know, I'm sure your departments do similar things. Once the fire's out, we don't just leave and we're done. There's a lot of follow-up that goes into it, especially on the chief level. So these are some of the things that we're concerned about. You know, if the sprinkler system, in this case it wasn't an issue because it was a non-sprinklered building, but if it was a sprinklered area, we won't want to leave without making sure that sprinkler is back in service. So there's protection for the rest of the building. We also have the authority to give violations so that we can give the building a violation to restore the system if it's not working properly. Make sure the fire alarm is reset. We want to make sure that's working. Do we need fire guards? Maybe the fire alarm is damaged. The sprinkler was damaged during the fire. We can't restore it quickly. Okay, we'll hire people that are trained to monitor and be there physically to provide a fire watch. And if there's a problem, they'll call your 112 is 911 for us, so they'll call that directly to call the fire department. The Department of Buildings, we may need their help because that's another city agency. They might need assistance with getting permits to do work and stuff. Sometimes they have to construct a sidewalk shed on the outside to prevent stuff from falling down and hurting people walking by. That'll need Department of Buildings. Our fire marshals is our investigatory branch of the fire department. They'll go in there, and if the cause of the fire isn't clear to us, they'll come in and they'll investigate why did the fire start? What happened? Was it arson? Was it electrical? Whatever the cause was. And then interagency meetings. Again, we mentioned this is a high-profile building, so we have the U.S. Secret Service involved, the New York City Police Department, Department of Buildings. All these agencies have a piece of the pie, and we all have to meet and have agency meetings. So these are just some of the concerns we'll have after the fire. It's not just that we put the fire out, we go home, we're done. There's a lot of follow-up that we have to do post-fire. So go to the next. And we just wanted to say, this fire is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This here is in the Bronx. You know, are you ready for the next high-rise fire? You know, we try to be prepared as much as we can for the next fire. So that was our presentation on the Trump fire. We did prepare, I know we have about 15 minutes left, we did prepare a second PowerPoint we'll go through with you quickly, just on the trends of construction throughout the world, really, how things are getting bigger and bigger. In New York City, all around the world, we have a quick PowerPoint we'll just show you. It should take us about 15 minutes to go through.
Yeah, all right, we'll go through it. She said yes.
They're going to switch it over for us. If you want to take a stretch break for a second, just got to set it up. Do you have, yeah, do you want to take a 2-minute, or no?
No break.
No break? Go right through. We'll go right through. Okay.
Okay, put it on. All good?
It's the next one. Yeah. Oh, okay, we could.
Where's that?
Manel, este rata hizo salir mal rato.
Okay, we got it.
As you really know, we're going to this quickly. I will answer questions. We'll have a roundtable. Maybe we can answer some. I got it.
We got 10 minutes. Okay.
We got 10 minutes.
So-
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to go through just a quick overview of this. All right, so that's a view of Manhattan. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is New York City's skyline, some of the proposed buildings. I don't know if you can read it down here. This building on the left is One World Trade Center, what replaced the Twin Towers. To the top of the spire is 1776, the year of our independence. It's a symbolic number. But just to give you an idea of how big these buildings are, and it tells you down here the proposed year, so 2014, 2019, 2021. So a lot of these are proposed to be built. 432 Park, which is in here, we're going to talk about quickly. We had a recent fire right around the time of the Trump fire. It's a 101-story building. We had a fire on the 88th floor. So we'll go through quickly. This is the new construction. Earlier I mentioned the Trump Tower building was built in 1985. These buildings are built modern day, fully sprinklered, built to the current code. So it's a difference in firefighting for us. It has a lot more features that are firefighter friendly, meaning that they're fully sprinkled, communication systems throughout the building. So, you know, it's a lot safer than they used to be for us because of the code changes.
Right, and you can see this is a trend happening all over the world. We'll go to the next slide, which has.
So
we did Spain.
Right, we put Spain's buildings in here. So you have Madrid, Seville, Malaga. There's a whole bunch of different buildings. You're probably familiar with these buildings, but we gave you your buildings that are proposed. Some are built already, some are coming, 2019, 2014. So throughout the whole world, no matter what country you're in, the trend is to building bigger and bigger buildings. You know, especially in big cities where land is not readily available, they want to go vertical because it's easier to build up than it is to build out because there's no space. If we go around the world, this is all different countries. You have Dubai, China, Saudi Arabia, New York, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, all different buildings. And the UAE in Dubai, it says 2,717 feet. I'm not sure what that is in meters. It's like, I don't know, 1,000 meters maybe? It's a lot. I'm not sure the translation, but it's insanely high. All right, 432 Park. Real quickly, it was a building we have on 56th Street and 57th, 101 stories. It's finished, completed, it's occupied, 1,396 feet. It's 425 meters. We had a fire there this past April 1st on the 88th floor. That arrow is pointing to where the fire was, 88 floors above the street.
So just for a quick reference, the other buildings around it are about 50 stories.
Right.
Okay? Just keep that in mind while you're looking at this slide.
All right, so the fire was roughly 1,250 feet, or 381 meters above the street level is where the fire was. All right, we have what we call SIDS data. Again, we mentioned in the last section, it's impossible to know everything about every building. So what we do is we go around and we write information that in the firehouse, when the response comes in, the ticket comes in for the firefighters to go out, we have a printout with the information. So you can read it while you're going to the building. It's a mega high-rise, so this stands for high-rise fireproof multiple dwelling, 101 story, 95 feet by 95 feet, the dimensions of the building. Entrance on 56th Street, 2 pressurized stairwells. You need 4 lengths, meaning 4 lengths of hose on all floors. So in order to reach from the standpipe to the whole floor, you need 4 lengths of hose. Multiple skipped floors. Because real estate in New York City is so precious, like most of the world, they play a game basically where physically it might be 50 floors, but they won't call it that. They'll say, listen, we're going to skip a bunch of floors and call it a higher number. Because if I say in New York City I live on the 80th floor, it'll cost me more to live on that floor because it's more prestigious. So, okay, I can sell you, even though it's the 50th physically, oh, I live on the 80th floor, okay, it's $2 million more to buy this apartment now. So anyhow, but it messes us up. That's a whole real estate thing, but us, communication-wise, there is no 88th floor. Well, it's just labeled that. It's not physically the 88th floor. So they skip floors, just to be aware of that. Zone standpipe system. You can't have more than 600 feet in one zone of water for the pressure, so they break it up, a low rise, a mid rise, and a high rise in the standpipes. ARCS is auxiliary radio communications. This building has a repeater system, so it's telling us on channel 11 or channel 12, we can talk through the building repeater, another mode of communication. And it also has one-way voice, meaning that I can go to the fire command station and get a PA system and make an announcement from the lobby throughout the building. They can't talk back, but I can talk to them and make announcements. And it also has a second address, 40 East 57th Street. Right. So that's what that information means.
So this information is put in by the local firehouse. When they go out, they'll do building inspection, or they'll take a ride over to the building. They gather the information. They input this for each building separately. They have to go to each building one by one and do it. So most of the multiple dwellings and office buildings have it. Some of the private dwellings may or may not have it. And this is a kind of a standard format that we're using for these buildings, which are over 800 feet.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, let's see. So again, this is an example of the new building code in New York City, 2008 building code. Every 600 feet, you're required to have a separate standpipe system. So if you look at this, the top one is that 432 Park that has 3 separate standpipe systems in that building. They'll have what's called an express riser. So to get to the middle one, that standpipe for the middle and the high rise will go directly up 600 or 1,200 feet to that next level. And so you'll see here that the Siamese connection low zone, and they put on subcellar to 35, 36 to 64, and then the last one is 65 to the roof. So again, another challenge for an engine company chauffeur is we have to find out the fire floor, and now we have to make sure that we connect to the proper Siamese. Previously, there was one Siamese on a building. You connected to the Siamese, that went to every standpipe outlet. That is no longer the case. On these taller buildings now, we're having separate standpipe systems put in. So, and again, the World Trade Center is the example below that also has a zone standpipe system, and you can see that it's labeled as such.
Another common feature with these buildings is the elevators. They're going to the destination elevators now, where they're more efficient. So if you push the button, you're not waiting for just one car to come down. It'll take you directly from the lobby to that particular floor. It's also good for security concerns. They can lock out certain floors you don't have access to. So when you come into a hotel, you might use, or a office building, you might use a key card or push a floor number in, and a certain particular car will come down. It's called a destination elevator. Very common in these newer buildings. But we still have control over it. It'll be a blank, as you can see in the picture here, a blank face of the elevator. We can open it with a key, and we can still control all elevators for fireman service, firefighting service, where we can take manual control over the elevator. Even though it's not for the public, it will be for us to control the elevators.
Right, so,
Another,
go ahead.
yeah, I want to fly through
You want to go to the next one?
Yeah, because we only have like 4 minutes. Next thing is, these buildings are very, very tall, as you can see, and they're affected by the winds and seismic movement of the earth affect the buildings. It's not uncommon for the building to be moving a little bit, a couple feet each way, maybe a meter or two in each direction. It'll sway. Structurally, it's fine. It has to move. If it didn't move, it would break. So it's designed to move. But for the occupants in the building, they'll feel seasick because the thing is moving. So they have what they call a tuned mass damper, or a harmonic damper in the upper section of the building. It could be filled with water, a hydraulic system. It could be a mass of concrete or a mass of steel on a hydraulic system. And what it does is it counteracts the movement of the building. So it moves opposite the building movement, and it stabilizes the building. So you could have millions of pounds of weight above in the building, and that's moving to counteract it. So you can expect that if you have a fire up there, just be aware you have tons and tons of weight in the roof area, but it's just to counteract for the occupants' comfort inside the building. You have these large weights in the upper sections of the building.
Okay, I'm going to do this. So, again, now, in addition to the communication that we have, that we went over in the previous presentation, these buildings are also required to have additional communication. So, local law 5/1973 was for commercial buildings. They're required to have floor warden phones, hardwire phones. That's another form of communication that we can fall back on if we need to. In the newer buildings, the ARC system, auxiliary repeater communication system, they have in-house radios, but now in the new code, they're required to put in a repeater system in the building. So this building, basically, the easiest way to describe it, has a giant antenna running up through the building. And we can come in, they have to be off, so they don't affect neighboring buildings. We turn them on, we change the channel on our radio. We have our radios are programmed to all these new systems, and we can now talk through the building repeater. Required in New York City, all new high-rise buildings must have a repeater system in them. So that gives us another additional way to communicate to the upper floors of these buildings. You want to go to the next
2
one?
minutes, yeah. No, just real quick, I think we have a 2-minute time constraint here. Real quick, under construction is a big concern for us because the building is not finished. So we have a dry standpipe system. We pressurize it with air so that we know they didn't damage it, they didn't cut it. We know that it's intact. So when it's under construction, we want to look to make sure that it's pressurized. We will vent it, hook up our water, and we know that it's an intact system. We were also concerned about construction hoists, the shanties they have in there to store their tools. It's all a fire hazard for us because it's all combustible stuff. They provide a job box, this red box for us. It has all pertinent information in there. So overnight, if we go there for a fire and the responsible people aren't on site because it's the end of workday, we can open this box and have floor plans, contact information, all specific building information is inside this box for us, and we'll look for that.
So,
occupied.
yeah, so we broke these buildings down into 3: under construction, partially occupied. And I think the main part of this slide to really look at is when the building, if you look at the picture on the right, it says 25 on the right. This is also the same building, 432 Park. 25 on the right, 41 on the left. Why is that? Because that's the marketing floor on the left. That's what that floor is eventually going to be. So as the building is built, the construction workers, they build the second floor, they write 2. They build the third floor, they write 3 as they go up. Then they're going to change the building to marketing floors. That floor, when it's done, when the building is complete, is going to be the 41st floor. The elevator says 41. The stairway doors say 41. The fire alarm panel says 41. Why is that a problem for us? Because first of all, if we have a fire, during this time, where are we getting the information from? Is it the construction hoist? Is it the elevators that are in the building? We can put us in a really bad spot above the fire if we go to the wrong floor. So we really need to know if it's a marketing floor, which is the left one, or the construction floor, which is the right one. Where are you getting your information from? Who's giving it to you? And how are you getting there? Because most of the time, when it's in this phase, the occupants, the new occupants that it's partially occupied, are using the passenger elevators, but the construction workers are still using the construction hoist.
Yeah. And then the completed buildings is just, everything's operational. It's occupied, all the fire suppression systems are in place, fire alarm, sprinkler, standpipe. It's just like a regular building for us.
I have to go through the multiple occupancies really quick.
The new trend also, for the most part, is they're not just building a single occupancy. It's not just an office building, it's not just a hotel. They'll make a group. It'll be certain floors are hotels, certain floors are residential, certain floors might be a shopping mall, might be residential, so it's all mixed. It's a mixed occupancy now. They want to get, rent and make money from all different directions. So they'll put commercial with residential, hotels, so it's one big mix. It's not just a straight one occupancy anymore. Let's go through that. Yeah, let's get that. Community outreach, again, I mentioned before that social media and cell phones sometimes work negatively towards us, but could also work positively. We can send messages out to the building, to people. They can get like a mass text or a Twitter message. Hey, listen, there's a fire in our building. Stay in place. The fire department's on the scene. So we can use it to our advantage for public information, for public education. We can develop messages between the fire department and the building staff. We could also check with the building staff for who's home, who's not home. A lot of these, one unique feature about these big buildings in New York City is they're not fully occupied. People will come from other countries or people that obviously are wealthy, they're spending millions of dollars on these apartments. They don't live there all the time. They might be there for a week or 2 weeks, and then they're back in their home country. So when we go to this big building, Chief Carlsen had the fire, he asked the people in the building staff, okay, we have the fire in 88, how many people are above? He said, no, they're all unoccupied. They're all rented. People own them, but there's nobody here today. They're all out. So we didn't have any life hazard above because there was nobody home. So because these places are so expensive, it's not that they're living there all the time. Some people do, but for the most part, it's like a transient. They'll come for 2 weeks for vacation, and then they're not there. They own the apartment. And just real quick, moving into the future, this is our final slide. How is your city going to look 5, 10, 15 years from now? Is it going to be changing? Of course it's going to change because technology changes, architecture changes, and this is going to be New York City in the upcoming years, 2020, 2019. Buildings are getting taller and bigger because we're out of space horizontally. We're going to be going vertically. And I would think that your cities will be a similar issue where, as time goes, it's going to be going vertical the same way the rest of the trend is to move up.
So with that being said is, what we're doing in the FDNY is we're doing strategic plans, and moving forward, what is your city going to look like Chief Facinelli said, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, and we need to start preparing now for the changes that are coming. Currently, the last count that I have in New York City, there's 22 buildings over 800 feet or 245 meters?
245 meters.
Right, over 245 meters, and 21 more that are under construction that will be done within the next 2 or 3 years. We'll have 43 buildings in New York City, 245 meters or higher. So we are preparing, and we need to continually prepare for these changes, and I'm sure that it's happening all over the world, that each fire department will have to do the same.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cire 2018.